It was the summer of 1940, and the skies over southern England were about to become a battlefield unlike any in history. The morning fog rolled across the countryside, curling through the fields like fingers of a ghost. Dawn had barely broken, and yet the distant roar of engines already marked the coming storm. Over the channel, German pilots, confident and sharp, lined up in tight formations. They had laughed the night before at radio reports, dismissing the Royal Air Force as amateurs, untested, soft. Their officers had promised an easy sweep. Intelligence had whispered that resistance would crumble, that Britain's defenders were weak, disorganized, a mere shadow against the might of the Luftwaffe. But confidence is a fragile armor. In the heart of that early morning, it felt unbreakable. On the ground, in small towns and airfields scattered across southern England, the RAF crews stirred awake. Mechanics, young men and women barely out of their teens, checked the Merlin engines, oil stains on hands, eyes sharp. In control towers, officers scanned the sky with binoculars, their breath clouding in the cold morning air. The wireless crackled to life with intercepted chatter. German pilots had not yet realized the storm they were about to encounter. Britain's radar had been silent for decades, a hidden web of wires and towers, each pulse of electricity watching, listening, ready. As the German formations crested the clouds, the first RAF Spitfires climbed from their hidden bases. The pilots, hearts hammering, eyes fixed, felt the weight of history on their shoulders. The air smelled of frost and oil, of damp earth and the faint trace of smoke from distant chimneys. The first pairs of Messerschmitts came into view, cutting across the horizon, sharp and gleaming. The Luftwaffe laughed at the specks below, convinced they would be swept aside. They could not see the intricate dance of British fighters climbing from every angle, every hidden strip, every valley and ridge. Then came the radio reports, clipped and urgent. Enemy formation sighted. Intercept vector 90 degrees north. Prepare for engagement. A young controller repeated the orders, hand steady, though his pulse raced. On board the German planes, radio chatter shifted from casual mockery to confusion, then to alarm. Spitfires appeared from behind clouds, diving like shadows, wings flashing in the morning sun. Pilots who had mocked, who had bragged over breakfast, now gripped controls with white-knuckled intensity. The sky was no longer theirs. Each dive, each evasive roll, tested every ounce of their skill. From the ground, observers could barely follow the dance above, but they felt it, a pulse of tension that gripped the countryside. Engines screamed, tracers painted lines across the sky, smoke trailing from damaged fuselages. Every Spitfire pilot knew that this day could define them, that courage and precision mattered more than numbers, more than confidence. The Luftwaffe had assumed superiority, and for a fleeting moment it seemed true. But the RAF was a living net, flexible, relentless. Each German fighter that climbed into the morning sun met resistance that was invisible, precise, and devastating. Below, in the villages and fields, farmers paused, hearing the distant thunder. Children clung to parents, knowing only that the air smelled of smoke and tension. The fog swirled, obscuring what the eye could see, amplifying every sound. Engines, shouts over radios, commands called from towers, all mixed into a symphony of chaos and courage. The Luftwaffe pilots, once smug, now felt an unfamiliar fear, the kind that seeps into bone, slow and merciless. They had underestimated Britain, its defenders, and the unseen power of radar, strategy, and sheer will. By mid-morning, the first casualties began to mark the sky. Trails of smoke painted arcs against the pale blue, a silent testament to misjudgment. In those brief, terrifying moments, confidence faltered. German formations broke, confused and unsteady. The RAF did not hesitate. They pressed with precision, knowing that every maneuver, every decision, could tip the balance between survival and disaster. And still, the day had only begun. The German pilots had barely adjusted their formations when chaos erupted across the skies. Spitfires and Hurricanes descended with a precision that seemed impossible for such young men and women. Every maneuver had been rehearsed in countless drills, every tactic honed in simulations, and countless patrols over southern England. Yet nothing could truly prepare a human being for the sight of dozens of aircraft twisting and turning in the same space. Engines screaming, smoke trailing, tracer lines cutting through the pale morning light. Each German pilot found themselves isolated, even within their tight formations, as the RAF struck from unexpected angles, invisible until the last possible second. The air vibrated with tension, a living thing that pressed down upon every shoulder, every grip on a throttle, over Dover. Radar stations blinked urgently, operators shouting into headsets, their voices steady despite the stakes. Information flowed instantly across miles, unseen but deadly. German bombers approached, unaware that their every movement had already been tracked, analyzed, and countered. The RAF had learned to turn technology into an extension of human instinct, creating a network that moved like a single organism, reacting faster than any individual pilot could hope to. From their cockpits, Luftwaffe pilots saw the flash of wings, the dive of a Spitfire from above, the sudden appearings from clouds that should have concealed them. Panic began to creep into their voices over the radio. Short-clipped commands, corrections shouted too late. On the ground, airfield crews monitored the unfolding aerial ballet, their eyes flicking from radar screens to the sky above. Mechanics tightened loose panels on incoming Spitfires, loaded ammunition, and checked fuel lines with the cold efficiency of soldiers who understood the stakes. Every small action mattered. Every second counted. Behind the control towers, officers tracked patterns, predicting where the Luftwaffe would falter next, issuing precise orders that seemed to anticipate enemy moves before they happened. It was a dance of life and death, and only one side had mastered the rhythm. Above, trails of black smoke rose from damaged German planes, their pilots struggling to maintain altitude, aware that escape routes were blocked. Fear, unspoken but palpable, spread through formations that had entered the sky confident, mocking, certain of victory. Spitfires moved like shadows, climbing, diving, and disappearing into the fog before reappearing to strike again. Hurricanes intercepted bombers, forcing evasive maneuvers that left gaps for other RAF aircraft to exploit. Each engagement was a small battle within the larger conflict, and the cumulative effect was devastating. Radio chatter on both sides reflected the shifting tide. The Germans shouted orders and warnings, voices cracking with tension. British pilots communicated with calm precision, issuing commands, reporting enemy positions, coordinating strikes as if the sky belonged entirely to them. Below, civilians felt the distant thunder, the vibration in windows, the roar of engines so loud it felt as if the earth itself would tremble. Smoke curled over fields, punctuated by the occasional flash of an aircraft in trouble. It was a terrifying symphony, a battle of nerves, skill, and courage. By midday, it was clear that the Luftwaffe had underestimated not only the RAF pilots, but the entire defensive system of Britain. Confidence had been shattered in a matter of hours. Pilots who had laughed at supposed amateurs now faced a reality that was both shocking and humbling. The morning had begun with arrogance, and by noon it was filled with smoke, confusion, and fear. Every dive, every evasive roll, every exchange of fire brought the realization closer. Britain's air defenses were far stronger, far smarter, and far more determined than any German officer had imagined. And still, the fight was far from over. The sky above southern England had become a battlefield of smoke, metal, and courage. German formations faltered under relentless RAF attacks. Pilots who had entered the morning confident and mocking now fought with desperation, their faces pale, eyes scanning every corner of the sky for threats they could not see. Spitfires and Hurricanes moved like shadows, striking and disappearing, appearing where the enemy least expected. The Luftwaffe had entered with arrogance, believing in numbers and skill alone. They had not counted on coordination, radar, and determination fused into a single force that anticipated every movement. Over the coast, bombers tried to regroup, weaving through trails of smoke, their pilots shouting orders into headsets, voices tight with tension. Mechanical failures and evasive maneuvers took their toll. Engines sputtered, wings shuddered, and the steady rhythm of flight turned jagged and chaotic. Every dive from a Spitfire sent shivers down the spines of German crews. They had mocked British training, laughed at their supposed inexperience, and now their confidence was a fragile thing, cracking under pressure. Every second became a test of skill, every maneuver a gamble against death and failure. On the ground, radar operators worked tirelessly, eyes never leaving the screens, hands adjusting frequencies and transmitting coordinates to pilots. Officers called out intercepts, tracing enemy movements like a game of chess played at breakneck speed. Airfield crews rushed to ready planes for additional sorties, working under the cold wind and creeping fog, their breath visible, hands precise despite exhaustion. Every second mattered, every decision had consequences that could not be reversed. The British system moved like a living organism, seamless and relentless, while the Luftwaffe reacted slowly, awkwardly, desperately trying to adapt. Tracers streaked through the sky, glinting like deadly threads against the pale morning sun. Smoke trailed from German fighters and bombers that faltered under pressure. Pilots rolled, dived, and climbed, each movement a mixture of skill and raw instinct. Communication was the lifeline. British pilots called positions, coordinated attacks, covered each other with precision, born of discipline and necessity. German pilots shouted over headsets, panic creeping in, orders overlapping, confusion spreading through the formations like wildfire. The difference was clear. One side acted as a unit, the other as individuals fighting for survival. Below, the countryside trembled with the sound of engines, the vibrations traveling through windows, walls, and earth. Villagers watched smoke rise above distant fields, the roar of engines punctuating every heartbeat. Children hid, clutching parents, knowing instinctively that the sky carried danger. The fog clung to the earth, hiding movements, adding tension, shaping every perception. Every dive, every evasive maneuver, every trail of smoke heightened the suspense, gripping those who watched or listened. Courage, fear, and skill intertwined, creating a tension that was almost unbearable. By afternoon, the scale of loss became undeniable. Trails of smoke marked German aircraft falling from the sky. Pilots who had entered with arrogance now fought for survival. Confidence was shattered. Every formation that had been confident and sharp now carried uncertainty, fear, and exhaustion. The RAF maintained pressure, relentless, precise, turning every advantage into a decisive strike. The Luftwaffe had underestimated Britain. They had not expected such coordination, such resilience. Such cunning in strategy and execution. The sky remained alive with motion, with fear and determination, with smoke and fire, with courage tested to its limits. Every second, every maneuver brought the pilots closer to a truth that could not be ignored. Britain would not yield. The day was far from over, and history was being written with every heartbeat, every dive, every action in the skies above southern England. By late afternoon, the skies above southern England had become a testament to courage, precision, and unyielding resolve. German pilots, once smug and mocking, now faced the grim reality of losses that grew with every passing minute. Smoke trailed from aircraft that faltered, twisting in spirals before plunging toward the fields below. The roar of engines and the flash of tracers filled the horizon, a relentless symphony of conflict that showed no sign of pause. Every maneuver, every dive, every evasive roll carried the weight of life and death. Confidence was replaced by fear, by exhaustion, by the dawning understanding that they had underestimated their opponent. RAF pilots moved with calm efficiency, though their hearts pounded with the knowledge that each encounter could be their last. Spitfires and hurricanes wove through the morning fog and drifting clouds, striking at formations that had entered the battle with arrogance. Coordination was the lifeblood of every sortie. Pilots called positions, coordinated attacks, covered each other, and exploited every opening with precision that seemed almost preternatural. Radar stations hidden deep in the countryside pulsed with information, feeding intercept vectors and guidance to those who needed it most. Britain's defenses operated like a living organism, anticipating, reacting, and overwhelming the unprepared invaders. Below, airfield crews worked tirelessly, loading ammunition, checking engines, and sending aircraft into the sky with a speed that matched the urgency of the moment. Officers directed traffic from control towers, voices clipped and precise, issuing instructions that transformed chaos into organized action. Each decision had consequences that could tip the balance between survival and disaster. Farmers, villagers, and children watched from a distance, sensing the gravity of the sky above, the roar and smoke that seemed to hang over the land like a living presence. The fog and mist of the 1940s morning added a layer of tension, obscuring movements and magnifying every sound. German formations fractured under relentless assault. Pilots who had mocked Britain in the early hours now struggled to maintain cohesion. Confusion and fear rippled through their ranks. Engines faltered, wings shuddered, and the certainty of superiority crumbled with every Spitfire strike. The air was filled with smoke, the smell of oil, the echo of commands shouted into headsets. Each German pilot realized that the day had turned into a nightmare. They had underestimated not only the skill of the RAF, but the ingenuity of the entire British defensive system. Every calculated strike, every evasive maneuver, every observation from the ground had combined into a force they could not overcome. By evening, the scale of the disaster was undeniable. Over 70 German fighters lay destroyed or disabled, streaks of smoke and fire marking their descent. The Luftwaffe's confidence had evaporated, replaced with a hard, bitter understanding of their limitations. RAF pilots, exhausted but disciplined, had held the skies, proving the effectiveness of strategy, courage, and coordination. The countryside, still shrouded in fog and smoke, bore silent witness to the bravery and skill that had turned arrogance into defeat. The battle had ended, but the story would echo across time. Germany had learned painfully that mocking the RAF was a grave mistake. Britain's defenders had shown the power of preparation, precision, and courage. Every pilot, every crew member, every observer had contributed to a moment in history that would be remembered not for destruction, but for resilience, ingenuity, and the indomitable will to defend the skies above their homeland. The day had begun with arrogance and ended with a lesson that would shape the rest of the war.